Welcome, Knowledge Sovereign here. Today, we're tackling a fascinating question. Did the ancient Greeks actually believe in their myths? I mean, did they truly think that Zeus hurled lightning bolts from Olympus? Or that the Minotaur prowled the labyrinth? It's a complicated question that goes beyond a simple yes or no. And it's one that Paul Veyne explores in his groundbreaking work, Did the Greeks Believe in Their Myths? Let's dig in. According to Veyne, the Greeks' belief in their myths was not like our modern understanding of belief. Instead, it was more nuanced and multifaceted. Veyne argues that myths were, in many ways, a constitutive imagination. They were neither literal truths nor mere fictions. They were a way of thinking, a symbolic language that the Greeks used to understand their world. Think of myths as a form of storytelling that bridged the gap between reality and imagination. For the Greeks, myths were not bound by our modern distinctions between truth and fiction. They lived in a world where mythological stories were both real and not real, where Theseus could be a historical figure and a legendary hero who slayed the Minotaur. Veyne points out that while some Greeks, like the historian Thucydides, sought to rationalize myths by extracting a historical kernel, such as suggesting that Minos was merely an early naval ruler, this didn't mean they completely dismissed the stories. Instead, they purified the myths with logos, or reason, to make them compatible with their evolving understanding of the world. But here's the thing. Veyne argues that the Greeks didn't exactly believe in myths the way we believe in scientific facts. Nor did they see them as mere fairy tales. It was more about the function of these stories in society. Myths were cultural tools that conveyed moral lessons, social norms, and existential questions. They were a medium through which the Greeks explored concepts like fate, honor, and the divine. Take Pausanias, for example. He wrote extensively about Greek myths in his description of Greece. While he often included mythological stories, he didn't always treat them as literal truths. Instead, he reported them as part of the cultural landscape, stories that shaped how people saw their history and their gods, even if they didn't believe every detail. So, did the Greeks believe in myths? According to Veyne, belief wasn't the point. Myths were about meaning, not facts. They allowed the Greeks to explore human nature and the universe, much like how we use science fiction or fantasy today. They were part of a broader, culturally shared imagination, something everyone participated in, even if they didn't take every story at face value. Now, let's think about this philosophically. If myths aren't about factual truth, what are they about? They're about exploring possibilities, shaping identities, and asking fundamental questions. Myths ask us to engage with the world imaginatively, to wonder what's possible beyond the limits of our everyday experience. In a sense, the Greeks believed in their myths in the way that we might believe in the power of art or the value of a dream. Even the great philosopher Socrates, who was famously skeptical of the popular stories about the gods, understood the power of myth. Although he questioned the literal truth of these stories, he also recognized their value in conveying deeper philosophical insights. In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates speaks about myths as a way to discuss complex ideas like the soul, love, and the nature of the divine. He didn't believe the myths literally, but he used them as a vehicle to explore and communicate profound truths. Plato, Socrates' student, took this even further. In his famous Allegory of the Cave, he used a metaphorical story to explain his theory of forms and the nature of reality. For Plato, myths were more than just stories. They were philosophical tools that helped people move from ignorance to enlightenment. He believed that most people live in a state of illusion, mistaking shadows for reality, and that the role of the philosopher, like the escaped prisoner in the cave, is to see beyond these illusions to the true forms. For Plato, myths and philosophical dialogues were not in opposition, but complementary. Myths could reveal truths that were difficult to grasp through rational discourse alone. In this sense, they were a kind of noble lie. Stories that, while not literally true, helped people live better lives by guiding them toward wisdom and virtue. From a philosophical perspective, myths can be seen as a bridge between the known and the unknown, the visible and the invisible. They allow us to grapple with concepts that are beyond our immediate understanding. And this is something that extends far beyond ancient Greece. Even today, we use stories, myths, if you will, to make sense of the complexities of our lives. Think about the narratives we construct around success, love, or the American dream. These are modern myths that shape our actions and aspirations, even if we know they are, in part, idealizations. In his dialogue, Timaeus, Plato uses a mythological narrative to explain the creation of the universe. He describes how a divine craftsman, the demiurge, fashioned the cosmos as a living being with a soul. Plato himself calls this account a likely story, or a myth, recognizing that it is not a literal explanation, but a symbolic one. This shows that, for the Greeks, myths were not discarded in the face of reason. Rather, they were integrated into a larger framework of understanding. Socrates, Plato, and other philosophers were not trying to destroy myths, but to reinterpret them, to find the philosophical gold hidden within. They were concerned with the ethical and metaphysical truths that myths could convey, rather than their historical accuracy. For them, myths were not just tales, but profound reflections on the human condition. What can we learn from this? Myths are not just relics of the past. They are powerful tools that continue to shape our cultures and our minds. Whether we're talking about the ancient myths of Greece or the modern myths of progress and technology, they influence how we see the world and ourselves. So, knowledge sovereigns, what do you think? Do we still believe in our own modern myths? Are they just as powerful, just as real to us as Zeus and Hera were to the Greeks? Let's keep this conversation going in the comments. And as always, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious. Until next time.